Well, good afternoon, and thanks for coming to our first Innovation Lecture Series talk of the new year, and welcome back to everyone, and Happy New Year, since this is probably the first time we've gotten together. We have a busy program and an interesting program for you today, and we also wanted to take the opportunity at this meeting to recognize some awardees for the NASA at Work, our internal innovation platform, which I think today has over 8,700 participants, which is really great around the agency. So without further ado, to start the program, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ellen Ochoa, who is our new center director as of January 1st. Please welcome Dr. Ochoa, who's going to recognize our NASA at Work awardees.
Well, thank you, and definitely would like to call out the Human Health and Performance Directorate. It used to be known as Space Life Sciences, because in addition to the great technical science and operations work that the directorate does, you've been really our most active organization in finding new and innovative ways to contribute to how we improve doing what we do. The path you've paved has helped lay the groundwork for other organizations here at JSC and the agency as a whole, and now even across the federal government in your support of the NASA Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. As most of you know, NASA at Work is an agency-wide web platform that provides the opportunity for challenge owners to openly seek solutions or new ideas from a community of internal NASA solvers. NASA at Work is sponsored by the Agency Office of Chief Technologist, and they've helped identify center champions across the agency. Our center champion here is Dr. Kumar Krishan. NASA at Work is open to all employees and is one of the many platforms that comprise the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. With a community of over 8,900 participants, I encourage you to check out the platform and the other activities sponsored by that Center of Excellence. And you can find links to that information on the Directorate website, the Human Health and Performance Directorate homepage. So Dr. Krishan Kumar is here to help us distribute awards, and we're going to have two sets of awards. First, calling out the names of those recognized with a Certificate of Excellence, and these people are being recognized for having won a challenge on the NASA at Work platform. And then he'll also call out names of individuals receiving a certificate of recognition for their contributions in helping solve a challenge on the NASA at Work platform. We have a total of 16 folks, and once you come up here and get your certificate, if you just move off to the side a little bit, we're going to get one group photo at the end, and then we'll proceed with our special guest speaker today. So, Kumar?
Thank you. We will now be presenting the awards. The Recognition of Excellence Award winners are as follows. Jonathan Arbery, for his solution to the challenge, how to maintain core competencies while programs and projects are reducing civil servant requirements. Cheryl Butler, for her solution to the challenge, seeking ideas for promoting management engagement in employee resource group activities. Stacy Keener, for her solution to the challenge, available technology to improve efficiency and effectiveness of training while also reducing cost. Stacy also is receiving a certificate of appreciation for her solution to the challenge, seeking ideas for promoting management engagement in employee resource group activities. Angie Linus, for her solution to the challenge, energy savings at the employee level. Brian McCann, for his solution to the challenge, energy savings at the employee level. guess he's not here. We go on with Lisa Price for her solution to the challenge, energy savings at the employee level. Rolando Quintanilla for his solution to the challenges, office of the future, how will we work, and how to maintain casual social interactions while teleworking. I just will move on to the next one. Michael Ruiz for his solution to the challenge, seeking ideas for promoting management engagement in employee resource group activities. Jacob Sylvia for his solution to the challenge, office of the future, how will we work? Scott Smith for his solution to the challenge, non-invasive measurement of intracranial pressure. Thomas Sullivan for his solution to the challenge, made in orbit satellite assembly demonstration concepts. Margaret Williams for her solution to the challenge, how to maintain casual social interactions while teleworking. The Certificate of Appreciation Award winners are as follows. Philip Good for his solution to the challenge, made in orbit satellite assembly demonstration concepts. Roy Lee for his solution to the challenge, non-invasive measurement of intracranial pressure. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you for contributing to the NASA at Work platforms. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks, Ellen, for coming over and supporting us with the NASA at Work awards. We appreciate that very much, and congratulations to all our award winners. We really appreciate the folks that are trying the new platforms that we have And we think that's helping us quite a bit in learning how to use new tools to solve problems at the agency. So for our folks online, one technical problem we're having is we are unable to load the document either for the WebEx. So you'll be able to hear the speaker, but if you'd like the slides down the road, we will get the slides to you, so please let us know. So this afternoon, though, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Carlos Dominguez, who's a Senior Vice President at Cisco Systems and a technology evangelist, speaking to and motivating audiences worldwide about how technology is changing how we communicate, collaborate, and especially how we work. Carlos is a member of the prestigious CDC Foundation, which connects the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to innovative ideas and expertise from outside partners. He's also a board member of the Institute of Large-Scale Innovation, which is a group of international leaders who use innovation to help solve complex global problems. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the first Innovation Lecture Series speaker of 2013, Mr. Carlos Dominguez.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon. I don't know about you, but with a sunny day to get me in a room on a Friday afternoon, I don't know if I would do that. So, and secondly, thank you for coming right after lunch. So what I'm going to do, because I've seen this movie before, and I've been in many audiences right after lunch, I got to get you engaged with me, and I got to get you thinking. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a little bit of a brain teaser game, and it's a group participation. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but NASA to me is one of the biggest brains that exist in our world. And I just want to tell you, I'm going to show you this quiz. I just did it with a bunch of high school kids. They only missed one. But don't feel any pressure. Don't feel any pressure at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a picture, and you got to kind of come up with what you think the interpretation is. So this is a warm-up. This doesn't count. What do you think that means? Yell it out. And this is group participation. We're going to crowdsource. We're all going to be in touch. What's the answer? Football. No, close. I can see I'm in Texas. What else? Sunday afternoon. Correct. Bingo. So now you got it. Are you ready? You ready? Okay, especially those in the back near the door that are wondering if this guy's not any good, I'm going to exit really quick. I know what you're doing. Okay, so here we go. The first one is this one. What's the answer? Come on. What is it? Yell it. 5 pounds overweight. Ding, ding, ding. You're 1 for 1. How about the next one? Half brother. I knew you folks are smart. Absolutely. 2 for 2. Here we go. Missing you. 3 for 3. You people can put people in space on moon, and you're going to get all of this. Come on, let's go. What about this one? Cleaning up after the kids. Yes. Yes. We have a perfect streak going on. Let's see if we can continue. How about this one? Close. Open and close case. Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm getting excited now because I'm starting to sense, we're getting close to perfection. How about this one? It's a hard one. Darn! I applaud you. You went all out. Okay, now I can brag about NASA. I can brag about you. How about this one? This is the last one. Close. Keep going. Donald Duck. Come on. So what are those? What words are they describing? Noises that what? Okay. What is a duck? What kind of? Okay. And foul language. Yes. Okay. Whew. I couldn't leave here and go, they didn't do as well as I thought they would. So let me tell you the other thing I did. I can't begin to describe to you the thrill it is for me to be here. There's such an emotion for me. You know, I was there, not here, in my home in 1969 as an 11-year-old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And I can tell you what the weather was like. I can tell you what we were eating, and what I was drinking when it happened. And I can also tell you that my grandmother, who was 72 at the time, after saw Neil bouncing and doing his thing, said, "Oh, that can't be real, and that's not possible," and she walked away. She was, as I mentioned last night, she was the first conspiracy theorist that was a hoax. But, you know, it's been something that's been a part of my life in some sort of strange way, and I think in every American's life right from the very beginning. So in coming here, I posted something internally to Cisco, to our 77,000 employees, and said, "Hey, I'm very excited about presenting at NASA on Friday. Please help me by answering this question. I promise you it's only going to take 30 seconds. So the things that I've asked them to do is, what words come to mind when you think of NASA? And they had the option to plug in up to 4 words. So I collected them. I actually think it was a little bit under 1,000 people responded. So this is a pretty good sampling. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty good sampling of how Cisco views NASA from the people that replied. So I took that data, and being a techie, I put it into a word cloud. And the word cloud looks like this. Innovation came up as a big thing, so we view you as highly innovative. Leaders came up. Excellence, visionary, national treasure. How many of you think we would consider you as a national treasure? You are, right? We respect you, achievers, space explorers, space, amazing, inventive. I don't know about you, but that's pretty darn good from a branding perspective. So, you know, I want to tell you that sometimes working in organizations, you kind of lose the perspective of how the world views you, right? And I'd like to begin by telling you, not only am I thrilled, but not only myself, but my colleagues feel pretty amazing about you. And one other story, and if you think I'm kissing up to you, I am, but it comes from the heart, and it's something I think it's important. I'm a workaholic. And not too long ago, when the shuttle was going to have its resting place, thank God, in New York City, on one of the aircraft carriers, that's a museum, the Air and Space Museum there, I took the day off from work. And I kind of parked myself on the New Jersey side to watch this glorious event. And I actually captured a picture of the shuttle coming in, right, over New York City, and, you know, got another one there. And I have to tell you, it was probably just to see the buzz of not only people my age, but kids of 10, 11, 12, even younger, all of us congregating to watch this thing happen, right? So as I go through my presentation, and if you're having a shitty day at some point in time today or next week, you know, just remember the value that and how you're perceived by the world, and especially anyone who's an American. So I really just want to take a moment and applaud you and say thank you for all that all of you do every day. And I'd like to, all of you, please help me give you a round of applause. So please join me. Thank you. All right, now we're going to get to the boring stuff. I'm going to talk about me for one brief moment. This is my contact information. The easiest way to reach me is, believe it or not, Twitter. If you're not Twitter, if you want to get a hold of me, send me a tweet. I promise I'll respond right away. But what do I do at Cisco, right? So I've done all sorts of things in my 21 years there, but for the last 6 years, I've been an ambassador for the company. I do this public speaking gig, probably 100 times a year in groups of sizes of this, to the multi-thousands, which I'll show you a photo in a second, to very small workshops that I do with CEOs of major Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies. And I also represent a very well-known business guy by the name of John Chambers. So I work in his office and very representative of him. And the reason I'm telling you this is that with the power of our company, Cisco, opens up a lot of doors. And the power of our chairman also opens up a lot of doors. And I get, on a daily and weekly basis, get to experience a lot of things. And all I'm going to try to do today is try to share those ideas and those things that I get to witness in the hopes that they'll bring some value in some capacity. So I've already showed you, this is my big gig that I do once a year, and just in case if you're wondering, it is me. And ultimately, all of these experiences, what I want to achieve with you today is two things. First thing I want to do is I want to make you uncomfortable. Now you're going, Carlos, I don't think you're too smart because you're trying to win me over, you're going to make me uncomfortable. Well, there's a reason I want to make you uncomfortable. When you're learning the most is when you're uncomfortable. When you get that new job and you show up on Monday, Friday you did something, and all of a sudden Monday you're doing something different, you know that feeling and queasy you get in the pit of your stomach? Well, that's when you're learning the most. And what happens is 6 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, you've mastered that job. You're not feeling that in the pit of your stomach. By the way, you're not learning anymore. You're an autopilot. What time is it? Time to do something different inside the organization. I know that's never easy. So that's one thing I want to do. The second thing I want to do is I want to change your perspective. The greatest gift anyone can give me is that I leave and I see the world differently as a result of it. And that's what I hope to do with you. So we're going to kick this thing off and really talk about a couple of things. I've been preaching this philosophy called technoism. Become a technowist. And I'm writing a book, which I had no intention of ever doing. Anybody that really knows me will say, you got the attention span of a 3-year-old and you have ADD, and there's no way in heck you would write a book. And they're absolutely correct. And in one of these presentations about 2 years ago at a very high level, actually it was a government group, after I presented, I had talked about Twitter. One of these executives comes up to me and argues with me with all his passion for 30 minutes why he is not using Twitter. And to be honest with you, I bought off on everything he was saying. I said, you're correct, all right, you got a good business case, I understand it. And just as I was ready, I thanked him and I was ready to walk away, I deal with trying to evaluate technologies every single day. And at that moment in time, I turned around to this gentleman and asked him, I said, by the way, just curiosity, how long did you use Twitter before you came to the conclusion that it wasn't for you? And his reply was, well, I've never used it. And I turned around to him and I said, how did you come up with all of this? He says, well, I just told you for 30 minutes why I'm not using it. And I've never used it and I never will. And I remember leaving there, taking a few more steps, and then I turned again to him. I said, you're a pretty bright guy. I said, did you go to an MBA? He goes, yeah. I said, what would your MBA professor say about you making decisions you know nothing about? Is that good or bad? And you see him, kind of go there. And all of a sudden I'm going to get fired. Here I is. I just insulted, somebody. And we argue back and forth. And actually, we become very good friends, and he's a Twitter user now. So there is some redemption for me somewhere. But it inspired me to really try to create this movement and thought as I talk to you about all of you becoming a technowist. And technoism really tries to answer two questions. And the first one is at the business level. The business level questions is, how do companies remain relevant? We're working in and living in this incredibly ever-changing world, right? It's the chances for you to become obsolete and to be history is faster and quicker and more likely than ever before in the history of mankind. So how do you remain relevant? And even NASA, how do you remain relevant? You're going into commercial exploration, you're going deep space, and you're doing all these you're changing a lot. We've got a budget deficit, right? How do you remain a priority in the hearts and minds of the politicians, in the hearts and minds of the American public? There's a lot of change going on, right? And it takes a different way of looking at things. The second question is not about the company, it's about each and every single one of you. How do you as an individual not become obsolete? How do you not become my grandmother looking at Neil Armstrong and saying, oh, that can't be real? Because she couldn't perceive it possible, right? And I think we're at a greater risk than ever for that obsolescence to creep in at an ever-increasing rate. So those are the two things. So there's a couple strategies that I kind of talk about, and we'll cover them in the presentation. One of them is this notion of leveraging what's available, leveraging the present. Just curious, how many of you use Twitter? Raise your hand. And I'm not trying to sell you Twitter. Be honest now. Okay, not many. Facebook? Okay. How many of you have a smartphone? Okay. How many are you using more than 10 applications on your smartphone? Raise your hand. More than 20? More than 30? Where are the geeks? Come on. There, we got a couple back there. Okay, yeah. Then the second strategy is really how do you prepare for the future? What's coming around that corner that could change everything and you need to pay attention to? So those are the things we're going to cover. So I labeled this conversation with you as this new world, new rules, right? How do you thrive, lead, survive in this rebooted world? So I've got more slides than I could ever cover. We're not going to be able to cover them all. So what I'm asking you is, as I talk about these topics, if you've got a question, ask me. Get me engaged with you, because ultimately I want to serve you to do whatever it is that I can do for you. So as I present and I talk, please get me engaged. So I also come from a very simple fundamentals, is I truly believe that it is an incredible time to be alive. As I share these stories with you that I'm going to present to you, it's all about inspiration. It's all about the positive attributes of our world. I don't want you to walk out of here and thinking I'm totally naive or I'm doing some sort of happy drugs. I think everything's got a balance and there's a yin and a yang to everything. But I choose to see the world through a lens that's very optimistic and very positive. And I do believe that the great things are happening all around us. But I also want you to know that I'm not crazy. So we're going to go through a little bit of a journey. We're going to cover 3 major topics. We'll kick it off with talking about these forces that are changing everything. We'll talk a little bit about what impact is it having on business and leadership. And please humor me. I'm going to bring it more from the context of commercial, not government. But I think there's some things we can share regardless of where you come from. And then the third thing is some strategies to think about. Who knows what this is? Picture of what? Serengeti. Interesting as we look to nature to really learn, right? In the Serengeti, survival is all about understanding the environment, right? You have to understand the environment and make adjustments. I don't think it's any different than what you folks do on a daily basis when you put people in space. You understand the environment, you're constantly making an adjustment, you're correcting. So in the Serengeti, the lion is the king of the jungle. And I love analogies that bring things to life. So if we were to take all the change that we've seen over the last 20 years and put it into this environment, the lion's environment would look something like this, right? Zebras are on machines. They're doing things. The way he hunts and the way they capture food has changed. And the traditional way of looking at it doesn't work anymore. And that's a critical point to understand. What I submit to you, that if we build a framework to understand all of this change and the impact it's having, it really starts with this basic fundamental of connectivity. At the root of everything that is being fueled, it's really all about connections, and connections in varying ways. And what I kind of talk about is there's been these 5 waves of connectivity. Wave 1, 2, and 3 has already happened. We're in the midst of 4, and 5 is yet to come. And the way, in the most simplest terms, is in the early 90s, at least the commercial internet, I know the DARPANET and all the internet stuff that you folks were doing were back in the 60s and 70s. But the digitization of information and access to email and web browsing and stuff was really in the 90s. The first internet message commercial was sent in December of 1990, 23 years ago. There are people in this room that may not have been born when we sent the first message, right? I know I have kids that weren't born that have grown up with the internet. The second wave was really back in the 1997. It was really more about how do you digitize business process? How do businesses get online and do business commercially? And we saw it with e-commerce and supply chain and those types of things. Wave 3, which we're still actively in it, is really all about connecting people. The social media, the Web 2.0 applications is really about empowering people, making people connect to each other in ways that were never possible. And those forces are transformational, as I'll show you in a moment. Wave 4 now, which we're entering in the very early stages, is the Internet of Everything. Every device, everything that we own, everything that is around us will be connected. There'll be sensors everywhere. That information will create huge amounts of big data. The big data will be analyzed. It'll present a lot of data for us, hopefully in ways that the data will add wisdom to us to make better decisions and attain our outcomes and our goals. And that's coming now. And then wave 5 is what Ray Kurzweil and others have talked about, the singularity, where man and machine become one. Ooh, Terminator, right? The cyborgs are coming. I think there's going to be a lot of value, and there's going to be varying degrees of this that are going to start permeating our lives in different ways. There are a number of ingredients that when you combine them together in every singular wave is actually the fuel that's bringing it to the next wave. You know, the number of connections. There's a lot of theory written about the more the connection, the more exponential the change will be. The speed of connections. In the early days with the 212 modem 300 baud, I couldn't download videos and do all the things that we can do today. So every time one of these ingredients is altered, or it becomes faster, cheaper, better, it enables a whole nother wave to take over. Storage, mobility, video, right? Today in a mobile phone, we have more power than, you know, a lot of compute power, and we do all sorts of really cool and interesting things. Generations, Y, etc. Social media, applications that are going, the processing power. And we're going to cover a little bit more of these types of things. But the key point on the ingredients is as you mix them up and they recombine, it really enables the next wave to take over. So let's talk about this notion of linear to exponential. You guys and gals are really, really smart. What's linear and what's exponential? Give me the difference. Somebody. Growth rate. And give me an example of growth rate difference between linear and versus exponential. What does the curve look like for exponential? Like this, right? Looks something like that. And the best example that I've got is Peter Diamandis, who wrote a book, oh God, I just forgot it, Abundance. Just stated, he said, you know, I can take 30 steps that are linear and I'd be out of your auditorium. And if I took 30 exponential steps where I double it, go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, etc., I'd walk 26 times around the earth. Right? It's a pretty interesting way of saying it. So let's put it into context with the laws of technology. All of you are familiar with Moore's law, and you know this whole thing of processing power doubling, and everything is doubling and tripling. Costs are continuing to decline. There was a time 5 years ago that us in the tech world thought that it wasn't sustainable. Now we're rewriting the books and going, yeah, it wasn't sustainable based on the technology we knew 5 years ago, but you know, there's all these new things, biological processing, and all these things that are going to be emerging that actually is going to accelerate Moore's law to be even faster, right? So this is going to hold true for much longer. So just to hit a couple of points on examples of what exponential is, who knows what this is? And what I'm talking about is not the airplane that's in the back. I'm talking about that big box in the front. What is it? Puppet show? Puppet show, yes. Puppets are... What is it? Big screen TV? Puppet show? No. What is it? Sort of. It is a computer product. Let me tell you what it is. It's the first 5 megabytes of hard disk. Imagine carrying that in your pocket, right? So, I mean, that's exponential. Then there's also a pretty good example, and I hope you don't kind of roast me on this one, but I figured let me pull one from NASA, right? You know, there's stuff, it's on the internet, so it must be true, but, you know. In 1969, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, if you take the commander module, lunar module, and basically mission control, and you added all the computing power together, it's equivalent to a Game Boy in the year 2000. And I can tell you, I was there, I took a tour today, and I was opening up the mission control and taking pictures of the circuitry. I can tell you the Game Boy had more processing power. That's exponential, right? Look at the change of what can you do now with all that compute power. By the way, I did visit your new mission control, and you do have very state-of-the-art stuff, so thank God. You know, the other thing that's very characteristic of this connectivity that's fueling everything is the rate and speed of change. So I have a poll question for all of you. How many of you think that our world is changing at a comfortable pace? Raise your hand and do it with vigor. Okay, we got one, so everybody together, let's boo and hiss. Boo, hiss. No, I'm only kidding. I want to talk to you, though, because for you to feel that way, you're doing something really good. So, you know, most people, and I poll people, most people feel overwhelmed with the amount of change that we're experiencing. So what I want you to do is consider this. Some very simple things. The first thing I want you to consider is that 10 years ago, there's no social media. We have a company today that has 1 billion people on their platform. We have a company today worth multi-billion dollars that did not exist a mere 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, Facebook had 0 users. And in 8 years, they've gone from 0 to 1 billion users. And that's enabled because of connections. That's enabled because of connectivity. We're able to do that. And when you have a platform that has 1 billion users, although this company isn't doing very well today, but they put out a game called Cityville, which is the follow-on to Farmville. And what's interesting to me, in 12 days, there were 26 million people on the platform. Imagine creating something that you get this kind of hits and input and participation. It's pretty mind-blowing. And by the way, it's still a very small amount compared to the 1 billion people that are on it, right? So this is the power of platform. The other thing to think about is that 10 years before that, or 20 years ago in 1990, the internet didn't exist. We wake up today, we behave in a way that is so reliant on the internet. So I'll tell you a funny story. We do this Connected World report where we survey Gen Yers, 30 and under. And we get all their information and stuff, and we compare it. We've been doing it for 3 years. 3 years ago, they were saying things like, the internet's more important than a car. And they were saying things that I'll take a lower paying job as long as they give me access to the internet. And all these things that I would look at them and say, they're out of their minds. These kids are like out in left field. I just did the report for this year, and basically they were saying things like, within the first 3 minutes that I open my eyes, I'm on my smartphone. I'm sending texts and I'm reviewing things while I'm brushing my teeth. I can't leave home. I'll leave my wallet at home and I won't return, but if I left my phone at home, I'd go back for it. Right? All of these kinds of things. And they're suffering from a disease called nomophobia, which is 64% of them is this fear of being without your mobile phone. And what I discovered in this survey is that I resemble those remarks. We've gone from being very separate in the thinking to now these devices are so pervasive to our lives that we are one of them or they're one of us. And it's been integrated into our social fabric and our social being. And I'm not stating whether it's good or bad, but I used to worry about having my GPS and doing this and my mobile phone was, boom, I'm there. Or looking at this. I just did a 3D modeling program. I bought a 3D printer, Replicator 2, and I can take any object, take multiple pictures of it, run it through a thing, and print it out in 10 minutes. Right? It's in this device we're carrying with us is really, really reshaping everything. But the point to be made is we didn't have the web 10 years ago. So just to show a little bit more, on July 25th of 1994, on the cover of Time magazine, it was the strange new world of the internet. Kind of bizarre, right? And it wasn't that long ago. There's an audio coming up, so if they can play the audio up on the next one, team, greatly appreciate it. So the other thing I want to show you is in 1994, on the Today Show, they had just talked about something on the internet. I'm not going to spill the whole thing, but what I want you to do is pay attention to the dialogue of some of the best and brightest newscasters that we had at the time and still do. And secondly, look at the @ sign that they use. Audio, please.
Back to 56 pass, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it
Okay.
said. I'd always
That's
seen
all
the
right.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard the around or about in the lunchroom.
See, there it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
what
do you
is
think about
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that massive computer
Right.
network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't.
I kid you not, and these are not dumb people, right? It kind of really centers the dialogue of the world in which we're living, how quickly it has come upon us, how quickly we have adapted to it, and how it's part of our lives. And if you extract that even further, if you work in web programming, online marketing, or the mobile phone industry, right, your businesses and jobs didn't exist 20 years ago. Didn't exist. The context and the backdrop for this is if you're feeling kind of like, wow, how do I keep up with all of this? There's a reason you should feel that way, because things are moving really, really fast. But there's hope. We'll find ways to really embrace it and change it. Just one other factor. I don't know how many of you remember that phone. So I have two relics next to my nightstand as a reminder. One of them is that phone, and the other one is my Bose alarm clock CD player that I never use anymore because it's all on my iPhone for an alarm, and I stream everything to Sonos for my music, right? But just a reminder. So the other thing to kind of think about this connectivity wave is this notion of local to global, right? On how that's operating. And you know, I was in ancient Rome this past summer, and it was amazing to me as I walked from one part to the other, really looking at, you know, where people lived, where they farmed, and where they ate, where, you know, where the laws were being made, where they were hanging out to have fun, and everything was pretty local. And as a matter of fact, most of mankind, from the history of man, you born and you died within maybe 15 to 20 miles of where you lived, right? And you lived your entire life, generation after generation after generation, within that cycle. And as we know, right, you know, the airplane made a tremendous impact. It kind of, you know, broke the physical barriers, it allowed us to travel much greater distances much more rapidly. But what I would argue with you is that the real transformation was when communications technologies connected us in ways that were never possible. And I can say to you on a regular basis, at least twice a week, I do presentations to organizations very far from me, sometimes in China, India, and I have one of these systems at home, and I get up, and I will be up at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll do my thing for an hour and then go back to bed. And my wife always goes, how'd it go, honey? I said, yeah, no, I went to China, and it was great. I'm back to bed now, right? It's breaking these barriers, and what I basically say, distance is dead. When you enable things like this, it kind of changes the world a little bit. Here's, I don't know how many of you have one of these toothbrushes at home. It's about $129, but if you really break it down, the motors are made in China, the brush heads are in Ohio, right? The charging base is in Hong Kong. Design was done in Germany and Japan. The plastic is in Georgia. Batteries come from, again, Japan. Final assembly is done in Mexico. Here's a $100 product, and look at the globalization of that instrument, right? And that's a really important point, because the barriers of distance are broken, which is going to enable us to do innovation in a much different way, as we'll talk about in a moment. The other thing that these connections have done in the wave that I had talked about, wave 3, it's really creating a very powerful, connected world where people are doing things that were never possible before, right? We've seen it in a lot of different ways. So here's a poll. Who was the Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2006? Anybody remember? I know it's a little bit out there. Anybody remember what it was in 2006? Me. It was. Thank you. You recognized it. I thank you so much for remembering. But the only unfortunate part, it was also you and you and you and all of us. And the reason all of us got selected is because information technology allowed us for the first time to democratize knowledge in a way that was never possible before. So if we fast forward just a little bit and we go to 2010, who was Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2010? Come on, you all know who this is. Who? No, close. It's a techie. No, techie. Zuckerberg. Good old Mark. Right? But here's the point. Here's the punchline. In that very short window in 4 years, from 2006 to 2010, we went from the power of the individual having access to information, and as the connectedness kept being out there, and we kept getting newer applications that linked us, like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these other things, it really enabled the crowd to have a lot of power, and thus why Zuckerberg was named. And that power of that crowd is really transformational. And we're seeing it happening in many, many ways. We've seen it in the Arab Spring, right? People were able to overturn governments that were 40 years old in the making, that they've been wanting to change and they didn't have the courage. That technology, the social media, was able to encourage them, be able to organize them, to be able to do the demonstrations and do what they were able to do. But it also has power. I don't know, any of you remember this? Any of you Bank of America customers, raise your hand? Do you remember when they said, hey, we're going to charge you $5 just for using your debit card every month, right? And what ended up happening is people were not happy. And what happens is they took to the web. It actually took my graphics team about 3 hours to find enough tweets that I could put up there that did not contain some obscenity. Just so you know the level of anger that was associated with it. But in typical fashion, a 22-year-old by the name of Molly Catchpole comes to the rescue. She goes to an organization called Change.org, and she starts a petition against the Bank of America to say, hey, no to the $5 debt fee. So what happens is pretty interesting. In a very short period of time, 300,000 people signed the petition. And Molly gets a call from one of the Bank of America executives saying, Molly, this is da-da-da from Bank of America. We're only kidding. We're not going to do that. Right? And this single person was able to change the outcome using social media and the power of connections. Right? Which is really extremely interesting. One of my favorite topics, Gen Wires. Woo! Right? I have anybody 30 to 14 is in that Gen Wire. I have 3 of them at home. And one of the things I always think about Gen Wires is our children, the Gen Wires, will never know the link between these two. I showed that to my 19-year-old. She goes, what are you talking about, Dad? It doesn't make any sense. I go, I know. I love it. You know? But they're very, very different, and they define work as that brief period during the day where I have to use old technology. Right? That's how they see it. I went to work, and they're getting me to do this. I can't do this. They got me tethered to a computer. It's like, they complain about it. They're very, very different. And the reason they're different is, remember this notion that the Internet's been around 20 years? Remember this notion that mobility's been around 20 years? They are the product in the first generation that has grown up with those tools. They're integrated. You can watch them very, very quickly. I didn't play the video here, and I hit it, but I have a video of an 18-month-old playing with an iPad. And all of you, anyone have young children here in the audience that has a kid with an iPad that can maneuver and do, right? And there's also a follow-on video to that. They're taking that very capable child and giving them a magazine, and the kid's freaking out. Kid's like, this thing is broken. He's pressing the finger on the leg. It's the funniest video. You should do it. A kid playing, iPad user, kid playing with magazine. But it kind of exemplifies, their DNA is very, very different. And thus, because they've grown up with these technologies and these connectedness, they're different, right? They're natural collaborators, right? They're a video generation. They're connected anywhere, anytime, largest workforce. And we collectively, as we bring them onto the workforce, by the way, 19% of Cisco's workforce is Gen Wire, and they will be one of the primary ones over the next 7 or 8 years inside the company. So understanding them, how to leverage them, how to really bring them in, and I can talk to you about these for days, right? But we have to embrace it, and we need to look at it. And they come infected with the new world. They come to us. And I've seen this happen. I've seen them come into workforces with all this vim, vigor, different points of view of the world, wanting to change the world and do everything, and within 6 months they're conforming, they're not contributing, they become one of us. And what we need to do, and I don't mean that's necessary, I'm talking about Cisco, we need to inspire them, we need to listen to them, we need to let them kind of help us change and grow. The sixth thing I want to talk to is this notion of independent to interconnected. There's a lot of things that have been independent, and this notion of sensors everywhere. I don't know how many of you, anyone have a Nest thermostat at home? Yeah, I do too. Do you like it? It's really cool. It's this internet-connected thermostat that over your smartphone you can control temperatures, turn on and off. You don't have to really do anything sophisticated in programming. If you're hot, you make it colder. If you're cold, you make it hotter. And it will save you between 25 and 30% on your energy bill by running an algorithm in the background. Right? Very simple, very cool. But there's a lot of things. Philips Hue, everyone familiar with the Philips Hue? Who's familiar with Philips Hue? Raise your hand. Okay. The light bulb has remained static, right, since Thomas Edison invented, maybe with fluorescent bulbs, but for the most part, it's remained static. The last 5 years, we've had the introduction of LEDs and stuff for lighting. And what they did was they took an LED light bulb that you can change any color, made it internet ready, you plug it into any socket, and you can now control it from anywhere from your smart device, an iPad, iPhone, Android device. So I'm thinking there for a second, what happens if you're a lighting control system like Lutron? The deconstruction of your business is coming from the light bulb, not from another, control and management system, right? So I can now build a brand new house, no lighting control, just put these smart light bulbs at $50 a pop that will last 25 years, use 10%, of the energy that a regular incandescent bulb would do, and I can control it off of my iPhone. Right? That's the power of these connections, and it's happening with everything. But more and more devices will be connected, and the prediction is there'll be over 1 trillion devices generating a slew of data, right, that we will be interpreting and hopefully be able to do something with it that's very valuable. So what is the impact of all this connectivity on business? So there's a survey that IBM does on 1,700 CEOs. And the reason I like it is the CEOs of these major corporations are fairly bright people. I've met a lot of them. You don't get to be CEO of a major corporation if you're not bright, and they are. The second thing is the fact that they're CEOs, they're not one-dimensional. They understand technology, they understand business, they understand global issues, and the fact that the sampling size is 1,700, you got a pretty good grasp of what they're thinking. So I think the survey is a really good one. And they say a couple of things. So one of the questions they always ask, what external forces or factors could impact your organization over the next 3 to 5 years? It's a pretty standard question to ask. And here were the options. People skills, environmental, globalization, social economic factors, macroeconomic, technology factors, regulatory, geopolitical, market factors. What do you think is the number one? Raise your hand. Who do you think? Yell it out, actually. You can't raise your hand to something I don't know what you're raising your hand about. Scream it out. What do you think is the number one? Technology, what else? People skills. This is a smart group. Actually, the answer is technology. And the second one is people skills, so you got them both, right? But look at how technology has evolved from 6th place to 3rd place for a 2-cycle interview period to 2nd place to now being 1st. And here's where it gets really interesting. They expect technology to drive the most change in their organization over the next 3 or 5 years. Change will be driven because the technological implications will have to force it for survival. Let's kind of go a little bit deeper. In the past, leveraging technology was all around optimization and efficiency. Today, what they're saying, it's really about convergence and connectedness. It's about connecting people. I think I've seen that movie before with Facebook and others, right? It's bringing the power of us as human beings together in the workforce to be able to address a lot of the challenges and issues that we face. And that simple act is going to push your culture into areas and ways that are radically different than the past, right? And we'll talk about it a little bit here in a moment. What do you think is the number one trait CEOs seek in their employees? 75% of them call them critical. What do you think it is? Scream it out. Flexibility, that's a good one. What else? Being innovative, very important. What else? Communications, being great communicators. What else did I hear over here? Open-minded. What else? Dealing with uncertainty. What else? What is it? People skills. Very important. I haven't heard the word yet, but you kind of surrounded it, so I'm going to basically list it. They're expecting people to be collaborative because they understand the power of the collaborative, organizations. What's the primary way you think they're going to face to their customers over the next 5 years? What do you think they said? Virtually, and if so, how? What technology will they be using? Social media. I almost fainted when I read this because I deal with a lot of these guys, and none of them are using social media, so when they said that, I was like, wow, okay, they're getting it. And they're focusing in 3 areas: recruitment and retention of talent, how they engage with their customers, and they're focusing on innovation through partnering. I had a wonderful dinner last night and with many of your executive team, and we were talking about, Jeff and others, that, it's really, how do you think about innovation through the dimension not only inside of NASA, but really outside? And it's pushing culture, really, right? A lot of times when you introduce outside parties into a big brainiac organization like NASA, the pushback is always like, well, they're not going to help us, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about, crowdsourcing and what the changes are and what's different, and really keep it in the mind that it's really about connectedness. So the point in the challenges and the change and connectedness driving these forces basically changing the business environment and the environment we're in, is really quite interesting. I submit to you that every business, every government and government agency and society is being rebooted. We're all being, there's no one that's going to not go through a major reboot. It's just catching up to different organizations at different times. And I mean, just as an example, right, how many of you remember the music industry? How many of you remember what happened 12 years ago when Sean Fanning from Napster and Steve Jobs with iTunes and the iPod invented this stuff where you can do peer-to-peer and share stuff? Did they say, Sean and Steve, I love you. Thank you for deconstructing my business. Thank you for eliminating my... Did they thank them? No. What did they do? They sued. They sued 12-year-olds in New York. And as a result of that, my thing is, if someday we all go to prison for downloading music, I just hope they split us up by music genre. Kind of keep us together, But we've seen that, and the game is over, right? The game is over here, where digital is the way to go. Analog is not going to be the way to go. And industries go through these phenomenal shifts, and instead of embracing it, they fight it. And they fight it because they don't want to adapt or change. It's disruptive. It's painful, right? And we'll talk about that in just a moment, too. It's happening in every industry. It's happening in education, right? We've gone from this scenario to this scenario, right? You have these kids that are extremely well connected, and they learn differently, and they're doing things differently. And I remember talking to a lot of the presidents of the major universities about 3 or 4 years ago. I said, dudes, your business model is outdated. You got to do this, you got to do that. And they looked at me and said, no, we're not. Well, guess what? They're all online now with Coursera. Anybody taking a Coursera course? Did you like it? He's on his second. I'm on my fourth. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and it's free. And the reason they're doing it for free is they're learning because they're seeing the writing on the wall. The day that NASA and Cisco and GE and others value talent and knowledge more than we value degrees from an institution, a specific institution, that is the day that that business will be totally disrupted, right? And there's certain skills that we can test to whether you've got it or not, and we'll accept a certificate and knowledge over a big degree. So I still think they're very vital. I do think I want my kids to go to university. I think the price points, I think the models, I think how they're teaching in many, many ways is very antiquated. So I think it'll undergo a major, major change. So here's the aha moment for me in looking at all of this stuff and the reboots that are going on. The aha moment for me is that in 10 years, over 40% of the Fortune 500 companies are no longer going to be here. The cycle of death for corporations are going to increase. There were 40 years at one point in time. It's declined to 12. 13 is where they're going now. And even the mighty will fall because the change is so profound. And, in the graveyard shift here that I've kind of listed, there are some companies here, they're not all dead yet, but how many of you, emphasis on yet, how many of you think BlackBerry and RIM is going to make it? Raise your hand. Anybody? What market share did BlackBerry own in the enterprise 4.5 years ago? 90%. 90. What percent of, how much revenue in billions did they do 4.5 years ago? 16. They weren't a small company, and today they're on their way out. Now, they come out with a new product, and they're not going to make it. The ecosystem will not, they can't compete against Android, they can't compete against Apple. Best Buy. I was with the CEO and the CTO of Best Buy, and I heard their plan, and I'm saying to myself, tough, because it's a different distribution model. They're competing against Amazon. Totally different model. I see people in Best Buy looking at the product that they're going to buy, scanning stuff, checking the web to see what the pricing is, and many times they're ordering while they're at Best Buy on Amazon or some other site. Models are different. Things are changing, right? So this is really an interesting point. And the point with all of this is that the ones that have the incumbency and success typically lose out to anyone who is an upstart because they're unencumbered by the past. The past really hinders people from changing. You know, there's a lot of organizations that I talk to, and they say, you know, we're doing this, this, and this. I say, well, why are you doing it that way? And they say, well, that's the way we always do it. Okay. You know, remember the environment thing? If the environment's changed, you have to adjust. And that's part of the thinking that needs to happen. And here's a sign of the time. In the same month, and I have to tell you, I cried when I saw this because I'm a big photographer, right? The thing is, Kodak files for bankruptcy, 100 years old, and the same month, Instagram gets bought by Facebook by $1 billion, and there's 15 employees. Sign of the times. Technology, business model connectedness, right? Environmental. So getting back to my Serengeti, right? New environment, trends, and technology. There's a whole set of new characteristics, right? People have power. We've talked about it. We're in continuous disruption. The world is globalized, where distance is dead. We're all connected, and things could happen much faster. The generation gap is increasing, but I think we're getting better. Everyone's seeing a big thing of upheaval. The speed of change across the board, across all our lives, is increasing. Complexity's on the rise. If you can introduce simplicity, that is a real key strategy these days. Introduce simple into complex. The competitive barriers are reduced. You can get a 14, 15-year-old kid, create an application, pop it on the App Store. They have no development, they have nothing, no support. They put it out there, and it's got 500, 600 million people it can reach, right? Incredible. And there is no new normal. Every day is a different day. Every day is going to be quite interesting. So these are the things we're dealing with, right? And the point with it all, regardless of what you do here, how you serve and interact with your customers is changing. The competitive landscape is changing. The way your organizational structure should be is changing. The way you hire, recruit, and retain people is going to be different. How you recognize, promote, and compensate is going to be critical, because that is how you're going to do some cultural shifts. Because the culture has to evolve. And I'm not saying you got to get rid of it all, but there are some things you have to introduce, right? And that's across the board, not only at NASA, but it's everywhere. What assets can you leverage, again, and how do you use and deploy technology? All of these are really, really important. And I'm seeing we're getting here to the end. So let me cover a couple of just two big things here, and maybe I can take a couple of questions. The first one I want to kind of talk about is new skills required. What do you think are going to be the characteristics of successful companies in the future, now and into the future? What are they? Flexibility. Okay? And by the way, as you give me these words, I want you to internalize it and say, NASA, do I have that characteristics, or do I need to acquire it? Right? So think about it. You don't need to give me the answer. Just think about it. So flexibility is one. What else? Innovation, relentless innovation. Customized products, right? Custom to a particular scenario. Being really good. Okay? That covers a lot, but I agree with that statement. I like really good as opposed to really bad. So I agree with you. Whatever your core is, you got to be really good at it. What else? Collaborative. Thank you. What else? Flexible. Accessibility. Absolutely. What else? What is it? Marketability. Cost effective. What else? Agile. I like that one. What else? User friendly. So here's my challenge to you. I don't know the answers for you, right? But here's what I've heard, and forgive me, sir, I am not a doctor, and I'm using a genetic structure, which I know is totally a bad idea, but I'll use it anyway. And what I kind of discovered as I go out and I talk to these audiences, there's a number of existing skills that you will have that you want to retain, but you better acquire the new ones. And this is what I've heard from thousands of people that I've talked to, and they're not all applicable to you, right? But I think there's a few of them that are. Adaptability is important, relentless innovation, collaboration, leveraging what's available, having passion, simplification, empowering, nimble, and you've mentioned a lot of them. And the question for you is, what are the ones that are important to the core and long-term viability of NASA and what you do as a core value delivery systems to the people you serve? And what are the characteristics you need to have? And go through that exercise, and then the next thing is, which ones do you have, and do you have them in the right levels? And those that you don't, how do you acquire them? Do you acquire them through training? Do you acquire them through compensation? Do you acquire them through recognition? Do you acquire them through partnerships? Right? Because without having these skill sets, you're at a disadvantage. Okay? So I think it's a really powerful exercise to do. And by the way, I don't care who I talk to, including Cisco, is we have a bunch of them and we're missing a bunch of them. Right? And we're trying to work very hard at acquiring the ones we're missing. The last section I just want to talk about in the last couple of minutes here is really ask you a question about change. Who likes change in the room? Raise your hand. Likes your change? If you like change, raise your hand proudly. Right? Want to see it? Okay, good. All right, so my definition of change is this way. It's great if it's my idea, and it's horrible if it's yours. Right? It's a really interesting dynamic on what it is, but normally things that I want to change are good, right? But it's not interpreted that way by everybody else. So let me ask you a different question. If you had to avoid and change your life patterns to avoid death, how many of you think you could do it? Raise your hand. Okay. Interesting. I'm kind of, you're almost identical in the people that like change and the people that will change if your life depends on it. That's kind of always an interesting one to see. I would have assumed everyone would have raised their hand on that one, right? So let's kind of take it one step further. After, a severe heart attack, what % of patients conform to a healthy lifestyle, right? That means eating correctly, exercising regularly, stop smoking. How many think it's A, 10%? Raise your hand. You have no faith in the human race, but that's okay. How many of you think it's 20? Okay. 30? 40%? Who's the optimist? Come on. Yay! No. It's 20%. Right? Okay, so it's a number. So let's put that number into work here. That means when your life depends on you changing, 1 out of 5 change and 4 out of 5 cannot make that change when their life depends on it. That's a really heavy thing to understand. So the key in understanding this piece here is the fact that the only way to transform organizations is not from the top down. It's actually from the bottom up. What I appeal to you, and the reason I wrote the book, is the inspiration from change should not be coming from your leadership team. It should be coming from each and every single one of you, that if you change and you adapt and you experiment and you try and you fail and you continue doing it, in the end, you are adaptable. And if you're adaptable, you're more valuable. If you're more valuable, you will be more recognized. If you're more recognized, it brings financial rewards. And thus, I hope you're leading a happier life because you're uncomfortable constantly, you're learning, right? You have a different perspective. So the longevity of companies will be highly dependent on how senior leadership inspires their organizations to become adaptable, not because it's good for NASA, but it's because it's good for them. And by the way, if you do that at the employee level, NASA is going to be incredibly adaptable, incredibly flexible. They'll have the right culture and address all the issues that we're talking about, right? That is, in a nutshell, the keys to the kingdom. So part of your challenge is, how do you make change part of your DNA for your own good, right? For the things that, you want to do. And in concluding here, and I won't cover this, it's actually easier to change during a crisis because you have no option. But how do you start changing when there isn't a crisis? Right? You folks have had multiple crises in your history. And when that is, everything changes, right? We're all working together, we're all doing all sorts of things, but it gets to the point where you have to do things very, very differently. The last slide is, I think Darwin got it right. It's not the strongest of species that survive nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change. So I hope, if anything, you have a framework that I offered you on connectivity to look at the world. I hope I've inspired you this much to become much more adaptable. And I hope to continue the dialogue with you. I hope they invite me back and we can get really deep into crowdsourcing and innovation in some sort of deep sort of way. So before I conclude, do we have time for one or two questions? Would that be acceptable? Yes? Mics are around somewhere. So if anybody's got a question, give me one. Okay, here we go. We got one here. How much sleep do I get? I sleep 4 hours, and I've slept 4 hours since I was a kid. So I don't know. I think it's the amount of, I'm Cuban, Chinese, and as a kid I drank a lot of espresso Cuban coffee. So I wasn't kidding when I said I had ADD. They used to put me in school, and the teachers always used to write back, Carlos is very nice, and he's polite, but he can't sit still. Well, guess what? They were shooting me with God knows how much caffeine, right? So we figured that one out. Yes?
When you talk about connectivity and collaboration
Yeah.
and all this open sharing, what is your view on security?
So they're two different things, right? So the question was, when I think about sharing and collaboration, and I'm assuming you're talking about outside of the premises of NASA, right? You're open sourcing and you're doing that kind of stuff. So I think security is imperative. I think security will be one of the greatest challenges we're all going to face in this connected world, is to be secure. But not all data is created equal, right? There are things that I need to protect at all cost, and there are things that are totally insignificant. So the balancing act here for you is, as you crowdsource things and you're letting the world do things, you're typically doing it around things that are beneficial to you. You're putting it in a context and putting out information that is not secure, not highly, volatile in any sort of way. But I would say you have to be very mindful. But I think that's the case regardless of what you're trying to do. Is security is really, really key. Oh, you're welcome. Another question? Okay. So how will the government change for the better with the use of technology? Now here's one of the things I want to share with you that's very personal. So this is not a political statement, it's just an observation. I was scared to death by this particular election. And the reason I was scared to death is I have a very deep understanding of social media and targeted marketing. And this election, and I'm not criticizing whether it's good or bad, was really defined by very black and white issues: pro-abortion, anti-abortion, gay rights, non-gay rights, whatever, right? And economic, non-economic, but we were making decisions on very, very specific issues on how we voted. So what was done through very detailed algorithmic type things, they found the undecided voters, found out who the issues were, and we're able to do very specific target marketing, both advertising and stuff. So my thing is, if we really go back and you do the analysis, there was a lot of manipulation going on in beliefs and in how we presented certain things. Be that as it may, I think it's going to challenge democracy for us on, are we really thinking in the right way? Not everyone is educated on every single issue, and if you think through history, the biggest horrors that have occurred were because people lied and didn't tell people the truth, and they weren't smart enough to detect it and understand it in many, many ways. And what I fear the most is that as this technology becomes pervasive, becomes much more intelligent, much more targeting and manipulative, that it could challenge us in some sort of ways. Now, that's the negative story, and that's my concern. The positive is I think with open.gov, with data.gov, and all of this stuff where there's all these assets that exist in the government, that they're opening it up and saying, do something with it. There's some incredible transformation that is going on. I also believe that issues, as time goes by, can't be hidden. When things go wrong, everything's in the media, everything's on social. I think, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So I hope all of that inspires the people that are in power to really try to figure out how we compete, not so much with each other or within a state or these kinds of things, but how do we compete in a global economy? Because when you go to China and you go to some of these other places, what they are doing in a unified fashion, because the government can control it, is really, really difficult. In a globally connected economy, I don't care how much innovation you have, it will be replicated within 3 to 6 months. I don't care what it is. And, well, I shouldn't say that. Some of the stuff you work on is impossible to replicate, but in the business that I do is you can replicate it pretty easily. Right? So I think there's some good movement, but there's some concerns I've got overall, and privacy is another big one, for me. I think we're going to be challenged on privacy in the very near future. I think there'll be a couple of events where some things will get out, and it's going to happen, and it's going to make us all retract from being and sharing and doing certain things. And that's starting to happen in different pockets. Now, it's very interesting. Typically, technology is introduced, and it has a societal impact, and then the laws follow behind, right? And the easiest example that I want to give you is 3D printing, right? 3D printing, I can download something from the web, manipulate it, reprint it out. So let's say there's a Nike designs a shoe, I get it, I change, extend it, put a different logo on it. It's the same shoe with some modifications. Who owns that IP? Have I violated Nike's IP? We're moving towards a maker economy where makers are sharing and doing all sorts of really interesting, intriguing things. So I think we're going to be pushed with all the speed of change and all these things. I think we're going to miss a few very critical hurdles. We're going to get hit in the head a couple of times, but I think overall the value that it brings will be exponential. And my closing comment is, I started saying it's a wonderful time to be alive. Over the next 5 years, it will be up to us what we want to solve in the world, because there is no issue we won't be able to solve intellectually, right? If we bring people clean water, I'm talking about Millennium Development Goals. I'm not talking about your scientific, but I mean human growing stuff in the right places and feeding people and clean water and a lot of the MDG goals, I do believe will be solvable. The issues are because we can bring the intellectual capital together, we can bring technology together, we can design differently, we can do all sorts of things. The challenges will always be laws, distribution, governments, and a couple of the other things. But it is our disposal. I've seen some really amazing things happen. And the last story I'll tell you, how many of you know Jack Andraka? Anybody heard of Jack Andraka? Jack Andraka is a 15-year-old kid from Delaware who I had the privilege of having dinner with him at the Clean Global Initiative. And Jack Andraka lost a very dear family friend to pancreatic cancer, and the reason they lost him is they detected it too late, and he lost it. He has a passion for it. By using the internet, by using standard diabetes strips, he was able to reconfigure, came up with an idea that he can detect 46 different types of cancers, 100 times more sensitive than any previous test, and he does it for 1/100th of the cost. 15-year-old using the internet. That's what we're up against. And you know, a lot of the projects that you're doing on the creativity side is really harnessing and tapping into the collective that is outside of NASA. And it's going to pose a lot of uncomfortable feelings. It's going to pose a lot of challenges of security. It's this, it's that. You have to do it and do it in a controlled sort of way. But you need to harness the entire NASA first, your partners, your customers, and then the world, and do it in a way that makes sense. And at least with what I've reviewed and talked with Jeff and the team, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to be back, and thank you for staying for the afternoon. Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Oh, my gosh.
So I want to thank Carlos for that and for the lecture this afternoon, and we definitely will have you back. It'd be great to have you back. We have a small, two things for you this afternoon, actually. A montage of the Space Center.
Thank you.
So
Oh my
thank you for
gosh.
that.
Thank you.
And a really deep discount on a BlackBerry. So.
Thank you very much.